Hi, my name is Cynthia Torres. I'm 43 years old. Originally from Brooklyn, New York. And my little story that I want to tell, hopefully I'll be able to help someone else get through their problems as well. I grew up in a broken home. My father was abusive physically, verbally. My mother also. So I think that all contributed to a part of not having stability of parenting wise. So my mother was very young at the time. My father, of course, was an older gentleman, he was into, and my mom wasn't really aware of his abuse. She always thought he was drinking. So when he would come home breaking up everything in the house or beating on your child for no apparent reason, she started getting concerned. That's when she found out that he was actually using. But since 3 years went by and the beatings weren't doing enough, that's when he decided it was time to hurt. What could hurt her most was her child, and that's when the physical abuse started. My father was very loving to me. Otherwise, I do have a lot of very good memories of my dad. So I couldn't understand why this man that I loved so much would come and just hurt me and hit me. My mom was the type of person to say, okay, you got to go stay with your aunt for 6 months or a year. She was always the running around trying to get it how you can basically survive type of mother, because she didn't have that stability growing up. I don't think she never learned how to give it to me. Obviously, she didn't have any affection for me. Anytime she would say she loved me, it was next to never. I mean, yeah, up until well before she passed away, I can't remember a time where she actually hugged me or, was attentive to me in that type of way. For that reason, I was always moved around a lot. That's what I learned how to do, was not be stable and move place to place for fear of not being able to be stable. So, it's that always I got to get out before it's too late or before something happens type mode. And unfortunately, we didn't have a good relationship as mother and daughter should. And that's all behind of a lot of abuse that I believe she allowed to happen to me and was aware of, and that could have helped. She never bothered to listen to me for anything unless it was something bad and acting out. So I want to say it was about 1984. My grandmother had just passed away from cancer at the time. So obviously, my mom had to stay with my grandfather, which is her biological dad. And she couldn't manage. She did have an aunt that lived at the time down in Florida. And she had asked her aunt if she was able to care for me for a little while. My aunt had agreed to, and I went to go to Florida to go stay live with my aunt. I was 3 at the time. I remember getting down to Florida and they made me feel so welcomed, her and her husband. And there was a little old man, he lived out in the shack. He looked like Santa Claus. I kind of liked him. He was kind of cool. I remember meeting my aunt and my uncle for, first time, because I'm a little girl and they got bicycles. I had my own bedroom all set up. I didn't have all this at my mom's house. My mother's young. She can't afford this. I stood down there, I want to say, for about 3 years in Florida. And within the whole time, the abuse wasn't by my aunt. She was also not a very loving person. I mean, she gave you everything necessity wise, but affection was nothing there. The affectionate one in the house at the time was my quote unquote uncle, her husband. So, there'd be a lot of times she'd be working and he would have to take me for the day. And I remember when it all started, the abuse, I was home with him. He gave me a bath, and I remember him fondling me as a child, and I didn't like it, and I would go away from him. And then he started the bribing with the little dolls, this, that, bicycle, trying to get me to really, really like him. It got to the point where I wanted to be around him all the time. I would cry to even go with this man because I thought that this man was the best man in the world. My aunt would leave, I would stay with. Everything was mostly touching to start with. He never really was oral with me or sexual, but within a year or so, that's when it progressed and got worse. Then it did become oral. Oh, kiss me here because that's how it will make me feel better. Or I'll kiss you there, and you're gonna like it. So that's when the oral stuff started coming. He would have me put my mouth on his um he would smell, do things to me, and then smell it. And I was starting to get like infections and stuff down there. My aunt thought it was, urinary or whatever. So I started getting urinary tract infections very young. I started experiencing kidney issues at a very young age. And then it went from the grooming to the oral, and he actually started becoming physical with me when I was about 4 years old. I remember clearly my aunt leaving to work again, and he called me, told me, come help me in the shed. And the next thing you know, I remember going into the shed to go say, I said, looking for my uncle, and I get in there, and he's like, oh, come over here. I need you to help get me something down there. So I remember when I was looking, I'm like, I can't find it, Uncle. He said, oh, you'll find it. Just keep looking. I couldn't find it. He closed the door, locked it behind me. And at that point, he had grabbed my mouth and put me onto the pink insulation on my stomach. So I was actually face down. That's when he had with his hands slowly started fondling and then was getting very rough. Then the next thing you know, he actually penetrated me. So I was about 4 years old when that happened. It was kind of weird at the same time. Like I knew he was doing something wrong, but I still wanted to be around my uncle. And next thing you know, it just kept going. And then my granddad passed away. My mom had to come pick me up and from the airport and got me back over to Jersey. I wanted to know why I was being taken away if I was doing everything that I was being asked to do. That's what nieces and uncles do. This is what I'm being taught. This is what I feel is it's normal. It's right. So when I left, yeah, I was crying in the car on the way home, and then my mother didn't really understand it. And then I told her, I said, Mom, I was laying on the bed and I was scratching myself, and she said, why are you down there scratching like that? But at 4 years old, I was already having tendencies to want to be, is this a normal feeling? And now to me, I'm feeling like I have to do this. So one day, my mother caught me on the edge of the couch doing inappropriate things. She hit me for it, and she told me, what the hell are you doing? And I said, sometimes when Uncle does it, it bumps. So she said, oh, what are you talking about? I said, he takes me to the shed. He says, he'll give me candy. And she said, oh, really? So she called up her aunt and she confronted her. And I'm going to take her to the doctor to verify it, to see if it's true, because I don't think my daughter's a liar. Now you're going to degrade the family by going around and saying there's child molesters here. So her and my mom got into words, but instead of my mother going to the authorities, she, as a young, ignorant mother, didn't know what to do, uneducated, and didn't have no one to help her either. She chose, since that's my aunt, let me stay quiet. I'm not going to want to bring more problems to the family. I couldn't say anything about that. She knew. So thank God I got away from him. I never seen him ever again. and I would never want to see him ever again. I flew back to Jersey, and my mom had sent for me. And when I got back, my mom had a new husband, a boyfriend, if you must say. Well, he lived upstairs and we lived downstairs. He became a big part of my life. Even up till recently, he just passed away. That's my father. I loved him. He was the best. I really miss him. He was the stepdad that wanted to hang. He took me in. I was 4 years old, and she was pregnant with my brother, my mother, and he took us both in as his own kids. Winded up having two kids with my mother. Their relationship wasn't good because he was a drinker and a womanizer, and my mother was the one who was always arguing, but it wasn't okay for him to have a drink type situation. So she decided she was going to end the relationship eventually. But before they did, I remember after my grandfather passed, my little brothers were born. We had to go to the Dominican Republic with my stepdad, just for a little while the process we was going through. We stood there with him, and my mom had bought a house and everything after my grandfather died. We're in the country. Me and my stepdad was there with the two boys. And yeah, I remember my stepdad started the abuse, bringing in the he'd have them drinking, getting high on in front of me, sexual activities. And it got to the point where I had told my mother about it, that, these things were going on while she wasn't around. My stepdad would start now beating on me, locking me in the house. He would lock us in there for hours at a time. I'm only like 7, 8 years old now. And I remember the guy that would take care of the horses, he had a copy of the keys. So he opened the back door and he would let us out. And he would let the little boys out. My brother was like two, one at the time, and two. I remember him opening the door and he would come in the house and he would just have sex intercourse with me at 8 years old in the bathroom while my little brothers was just playing freely. Like I said, at a young age, I started feeling sexual desires, but to now, where I was 8 years old, almost 9 years old, I remember after a few months of that going on, my mom had came and I told her what was going on with him, and she had told my dad, my stepdad, and my stepdad, they went down and him and three other people, and they said, "Oh, he's a well-known gentleman of the society and the community. He's been doing this for years, and no one else children have complained about him." My mother picks us up, takes us away from the danger, takes us out of the Dominican Republic. And I remember flying into New York that day. My grandfather's friend picked me up from the airport. I said, "You know why I love you so much?" He said, "Why?" I said, "Because you don't make me do those things that those other people do." And he says, "You tell me right now what you saying." And I told him, he said, "You better take that baby to a hospital and you better find out if she's telling the truth." And when my mother took me at 8 years old, they gave me a pap smear. I sat there and I screamed because that was the most degrading and painful thing anyone has ever done to me, aside from being molested. When she found out that it was true that I was abused, she never apologized for not believing me. It was more like, well, it happened, it's over, just shut up and you don't need to say nothing about it. So I learned to stay quiet a lot. And I think with that, that brought me early on. I did rebel around 18 into my early 20s, where I was having three boyfriends at one time. I wanted attention, but I wanted it from everybody. which wasn't a good attention. I had to learn that slowly, that what I went through was traumatizing, and no child deserves to be hurt that way. At that time I was 8 years old. Um and so, that was very traumatic for me, because I did get to know my father. Even though he was abusive and he did do and he did hit me, do have those good memories of riding on the train with him, break dancing, doing things. We had so much fun. Growing up in Brooklyn was the best days of my childhood. And after he passed away, it was like, okay, who do I have now? That was my father. And I understand now that he had a problem. He had a problem that he couldn't help his own self because he was sick. It's like, okay, take the kid. I don't want to deal with her. So since I have now one, two, three, four other children, she's the oldest one, since she's the one who can talk more. So we gotta have to get her out the house. I'm gonna say she's a problem and remove her. I had the ADHD. They had me on all kind of and this and that growing up as a kid, that, like, what do you expect me to do? Sending me away to a foster home that I don't know no one. I could see if it was foster care, but in Jersey, they don't send you to foster care. You really get put into residential homes. So I was sent all the way from Jersey to Hackensack, away from my mother, and placed into a residential home for bad kids. Her way of showing affection was buying us things, and she always made sure she got it for us, but affection, that was totally not there. She moved from New Jersey to Massachusetts, left me behind in the system, at which time they had to track her down all the way in Massachusetts, almost 5 hours away, to have her come back and pick me up because she was going to go to jail for abandonment of a child in the state of Jersey. So what happened? She had to bring me to Massachusetts with her. But once we got here, she literally, within a few months, put me right back into a residential home in Massachusetts. So I was in the system till I was about 16 years old, in and out of residential homes, foster cares. I would run away and I would try to get back to my mother's house. So after I would get tired of her saying that I was running away to her house. So since you don't want me here, then I gotta hustle and I gotta make moves. I'm gonna go hang where I want to be hanged out with people who want me around them. And that's when I would start leaving to Brooklyn at like 14, and I would go hang out with my cousins, or sneak out and tell my aunts and uncles that I had permission. So once I got married at a young age, when I met my husband, well, my boyfriend, whatever, at the time I was about 17. I married into a family of a friend. I got into that relationship. We was very poor. He was a single father at the time, so I guess that's what attracted me more. I had to be protective of something, and I felt comfort in protecting his children. When I met his daughter, I fell in love with her. I was like, this girl is so beautiful, and she still is today. She's 29, and I love her. So that's my daughter. I don't care. I got with him because of the kid. I'm going to be a parent. I'm going to be this kind of parent. And I loved every minute of it, because in reality, there is the ones who, for these past 29 years, have made me and given me a reason to live. And because of them, I've never had children personally myself, due to the damage of me being abused as a child. It made me unable to conceive my own children. So that's why I'm happy I got the chance to raise, at least three or four that weren't mine. My first relationship showed me a lot about love, and it was good. My husband passed away in 2002, and I was left alone with the three kids. At which time I had to step up, obviously, not only as wife, but as their stepmother. So I was kind of lost without my husband. I was only like 20 at the time. So I felt overwhelmed with 3 kids, no job. I want to say 2 years after that, I felt it was too much for me. And I contacted my mother in law, and she took full custody of the kids, and she's had them ever since. But I do make sure I check on them. We video call every day or whatever. Yeah, after he passed away, I stood with my kids, and winded up meeting my second relationship after. And that's the craziness. That's when the cheating once again, the little physical abuse, nothing really sexual. It was all mostly physical hitting. And then after that, I became the abuser. After that, I became the one who was doing the verbal abuse, the physical abuse. Um, thank God I was never ever abusive with anybody. Now at this time, I'm like, okay, I think it's time you need to step back, step away from, everything, sit back and focus on yourself, and being coming from the situations that I've come from and going through what I'm going through now as an adult. It's just a little bit hard. So I try not to juggle the mental and the physical at the same time because it's a little bit too much. But yeah, there's times I sit here, cry, well, I'll talk to my cousins and we'll be conversating, and I'll come out with sarcastic remarks like, yeah, that's why I was molested. And they'll be like, that's not funny. I'm like, well, it is what it is. Or I'll be like, that's why I've been having sex since I'm 4 years old. And they're like, that's not funny. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's just a harsh reality that I just happen to come out and say. So, yeah, I'm very protective of like kids around me. I don't know why, but I got to get like predator dye on my forehead or something because I can't see it or imagine it happening to any other body's child. Like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Nobody deserves to suffer any physical, mental, verbally, it doesn't matter. I don't think abuse is anything no one should ever have to go through. Something bad happened to me. No, we can sit here, we could talk about it. I could tell you things. I've been through worse things than some other people probably been through. Then again, it's always good to have somebody to trust and talk to, whether it's a family, a very good friend, a teacher, or anyone else. It's always good to have somebody safe to talk to.